Hi, my name is Clark Harmon. For my sport management interview, I interviewed Burl Love, science teacher and athletic director of Forbush High School in East Bend, North Carolina. Burl has been teaching at Forbush for 17 years and has been a full-time AD for 4 of those years. Upon receiving a teaching job at Forbush High School, Burl decided to start coaching. He coached for 9 years. He coached 5 years as the assistant softball coach and 4 years as the head softball coach, as well as 2 years as the assistant volleyball coach. Burl went into teaching mainly. He went to Western to study for biology education. He wanted to just teach, but upon taking a coaching baseball class at Western Carolina, he decided to pursue coaching, which then led to him gaining the athletic director position. Burl was not always planning to be an athletic director, as I stated, but upon the retirement of their longtime athletic director, Burl was asked to step into a full-time position there, as well as continue his teaching duties. He said that the most influential people in his life had been high school teachers that led him into the teaching profession. But when he took the coaching class at Western, the head baseball coach for Western Carolina University pushed him and pressured him into coaching, which then led to him becoming an AD. He also said that the old AD, his predecessor, was very influential in making him the athletic director he is today, as he got to learn and grow underneath him. He does not coach currently. He said that it was very interesting for him to see athletic directors that did have the time to coach. He works probably 50 to 60 hours a week. He teaches only 15 of those hours. All other hours that he puts in at work are doing his athletic director duties. The 3 most important things he said for athletic directors at any level were organization, communication, and sound decision-making skills. Through those 3, he was able to tell me that he has been an effective athletic director, he believes, and wants to continue on that success. Some of the essential duties he mentioned were scheduling activity buses, scheduling non-conference games, checking the eligibility of student athletes, field maintenance, budgeting, payroll, compliance, all of that. So there's a huge umbrella, I learned, that covers all of the athletic directing positions or responsibilities in a high school. So I thought it was a lot more narrow, but Burl shed some light on what he actually does, and he does a ton. When you think about it, he said 15 hours a week teaching, but he works 50 to 60, so he's working 35 to 45 hours a week just on his athletic director duties. One of the most interesting questions I was able to ask him was, if you were going to write a job description hiring someone to your own position, what would be your opening sentence? And this is what Mr. Love had to say. Quote, "Seeking highly motivated, hardworking problem solver, willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure the continued success of Forbush High School athletic program." And then in parentheses, "and to be called on 24/7." End quote. So this was very interesting, I thought. I was able to kind of see what the initial duties and job description would be and really get some insight into the top priority things. Motivated, hardworking problem solver. It's pretty much exactly what he said the top 3 important things were, is organized, sound decision-making skills, and communication. Being an athletic director, you're the leader of an entire school's athletic program. You're not just scheduling, you're not just budgeting, you're the face of the program. So you really have to be motivated. You have to want to push your teams and push your school to the next level athletically. You have to be hardworking, putting in those 60 hours a week to make sure that all of your programs are sound and performing to the best that they can. But more than anything, there are a lot of problems that come through high school sports. There are a lot of problems that come through all sports. When you look at any recreation, there's a lot of problems that arise with parents, with coaches, with students, with field maintenance, with budget cuts, with anything, and especially in public schools when you have such a small budget. So that was a really interesting question. I thought I was able to get some insight. So he said his favorite duty or obligation was game supervision. He doesn't always get to see the games just from a seated fan perspective, but just being able to see his student athletes participate in the sports that they love and participate at a high level, he said, was very rewarding. His least favorite was the paperwork pertaining to coaching payroll. He said it's just a mess. If he messes up, people don't really get their paycheck, and he gets yelled at. So as you can imagine, just that part, doing the paperwork, doing the filing, the organizing, is probably just not the funnest thing in the world. Um, the most rewarding experience Burl has experienced as his time as AD was last year for 2015-16 school year. Forbush High School actually won the Wells Fargo Cup at the end of the year. It's awarded for whoever they felt in each conference, whoever the state felt was the highest contributor and the top performer. So when you look across the board at all sports, who was the most competitive? And Forbush won it for their conference. So that's a huge deal and something he said he was very proud of because it showed that their program is competitive, their program is hardworking, they have good kids, good coaches, and good fans. So it was something that he was able to share with the small community of East Bend and something that he can share with them from here on out. I was able to ask him a little bit about the scheduling process. That was something that going into this I was very interested in finding out about. I never really quite understood how athletic directors really schedule non-conference games, conference games, how that whole process works. So I was able to uncover a little bit of that from Mr. Love, and he was able to explain it to me that within 2 weeks of the end of a current season, the NCHSSAA actually puts out the schedule for the next year for the conference. So you get the conference schedule done by the state organization, the governing body, and then you're able to fill in your non-conference games. So he said a lot of ADs actually schedule these non-conference games for their teams, but he feels that it's best to let the coaches do it, so he doesn't have to deal with it. A and B, if they lose those games, if they're hard games, if anything like that, it's on them. It's not on him. And I think that's a big thing. Is I've been in schools, I've coached at schools that people get upset with the AD when their team is losing their non-conference games. But by allowing coaches to pick it, it's kind of on them. The coaches can't really get upset because they're the ones who pick the non-conference games. The big thing he said about all of this is just the scheduling of the activity bus, making sure that there's no conflict between men's soccer and football since they share a field, or one's away when the other one's home, or they're not both away on the same weekend, so that they have as many buses as they need, they have the facilities that they need, and there are no conflicts there. So I think that's a big thing too that a lot of people overlook. A big thing that comes through athletic directing and coaching at a high school level is issues with parents, issues with players, and from an athletic director standpoint, issues with coaches. So my question was, how do you deal with that in a positive way and continue the success of your program, continue the motivation that your players and coaches have? How do you do that in a positive way? What he said is that he sees more parents have issues with playing time for their kids more than anything. They think their kid should be having more playing time, or that they're better than other players. And as an athletic director, you can't really do much for that. You can't force your coaches to play certain kids over others. You can't do things like that. A, it's not ethical, and B, it's just not your place. You've hired these coaches to do the best of their ability, to do what they feel is best for their program, and to succeed in any way that they see fit within the confines of the law. So I think it came down to, for Burl, is what he said is that, it was more about just ensuring them that he's hired the best people, that he has got the best coaches, and that the coaches know what they're doing. When it comes down to coaching problems, he said it's more of he'll sit down with the parent, the coach, and the student and kind of talk that out, rather than just going and yelling at the coach or just taking the parent's word for coaching issues outside of playing time. And then a new thing he said he's going to start doing is coaching evaluations at the end of the year. So sitting down coaches and discussing with them that this is what we need for your program to succeed. This is what we need for you to change about the way you coach and different things like that. So I think that'll be a big thing for him going forward, is able to see what coaches think the weaker spots of their team is, what coaches think they need to change, what he thinks that coaches need to change, and being able to talk that out. And that comes into the communication aspect of the three important parts that he stated earlier. So I think that's a big deal and something that he can work on. And he states later, we talked about it later on, is that was a place that he felt he kind of lacked, was in rejuvenating a team after a disappointing season. So when they have a disappointing season, when a team doesn't perform to the best of their ability, coming from the community that Forbush is in, I know their program. Their football team has had some disappointing seasons, as well as their basketball team, but across the board, they're a pretty competitive unit, as they won the Wells Fargo last year. They've been growing, they've been building on those weaker team sports, but their individual sports and their Olympic sports are really competitive. Their soccer teams are both always very competitive. Their baseball team, softball team, and volleyball team are always very competitive. So, I mean, they have these huge competitive sports, but they have some that are also a little weaker. They've been building on those, and in the past 2 years, I've seen a huge growth in those teams, and their records show it. So when I asked, how do you rejuvenate a team after a disappointing season, that's when he brought into account the coaching evaluations, and he feels that sitting down with a coach and discussing with him what can be done to better the team for next year is something that he needs to start doing and something he needs to be better about than what he's already doing. He said he's looking to make it a formal system that he can document in writing so that he can keep that around and help the coaches help the teams. With that being said, also, it is a very small town. East Bend, North Carolina is where I grew up. It's home. I love it, but it's very small. There are only 2 high schools in Yadkin County. It's like I said, a small town. So what were the disadvantages and advantages of being an athletic director in a small town? He really only had one that was both an advantage and a disadvantage, and it was the community. Having the support and involvement from the community. It can be both a plus, but it can also be a headache. So the great thing about it is that they have that support. They have their stands are packed every football game, every basketball game, every baseball game, every volleyball game. It doesn't matter what sport, the community wants to be behind them and support them. Mainly because the people who are playing, are related to each other. They have family, they have friends. Like, the whole community wants to support this family. So, I mean, that's a great thing and something that a lot of schools don't get. And especially urban schools. A lot of rural schools see it more because that's what they have to do. In East Bend, that's kind of what it was, is you go to football games on Friday night. But when you have more to do, you see kind of less of a support system, I feel like. So that's a big thing for being in a small town, in a small community. The problem with that, though, is that a lot of these kids, their parents were their coaches through the entire recreation system. My dad was my coach for Forbush rec ball growing up, ages 4 to 12 or 13 or whatever it is until you get to middle school. It's changed now. When I was in there, you could do it until high school. I think they switched it to middle school now. But, I mean, my dad coached me in soccer, baseball, and basketball until I was in middle school. And now they're, upping it and playing these club sports and stuff. So now they're coaching from the age of 4 to the age of 13, 14, 15. And the problem is that these parents that coach their kids want their kids to be a superstar at the next level, which is great. And I wouldn't be where I am today if my dad didn't push me in that direction. But the problem is that they get too involved. They think that their freshman is better than a 4-year starting senior. They think that they're almost entitled to something because their kid is so good. So the parent involvement is great, but it, as Burl said, quote, it becomes problematic when they get to high school sports and daddy thinks he knows more than the coach that his child is now playing for, end quote. So I think that's a good way of putting it. It's kind of sarcastic saying daddy wants, but I think it's a good way of summing that up, that they think they know better because it's their kid. But we've hired these coaches. Mr. Love has hired these coaches that he feels like are the best at their job, and they've got to let them kind of do that. And if we see more of that, I think being in a small community could be 100% beneficial and take that negative away. And I don't really see anything wrong with it that he pointed out. So lastly, I wanted to see what challenges he faced when he took the position. As he said, he's only been around 4 years, but he also made a point to say that he felt that the preceding AD didn't really, that he had a lot of challenges. So I wanted to see what those challenges were and how he went about fixing them. So he said his predecessor had a really hands-off approach, which I think is common, especially in these small towns. I don't know why, but athletic directing doesn't seem to be a priority. It's probably due to the fact that most athletic directors are playing that dual role as teacher and athletic director, and that's can be an issue with time management. So, but the problem that comes down to being a hands-off athletic director is that you let your coaches have too much free reign, number one, and you don't really have a hand in what's going on in your program. Yeah, you're the face of the program, but are you really doing anything to A, build it, or B, maintain it? So what it came down to was that he came in and had to face some of those challenges of regaining coaches' trust, pulling everyone back kind of together so that he could kind of be the athletic director, instead of just a fan that signed their checks. And then the other problem that he faced is that in his 4 years, he has had 4 different principals. The academic administration at Fort Bush High School is ever changing, as it has been. But in the past 4 years, they've been trying to really solidify it, and I think it's become an issue, especially for their athletic program, because when you have a principal come in that doesn't really know the ins and outs of the school, a new principal, somebody who doesn't really understand what the athletic program needs from an academic standpoint, it really becomes an issue for him to be able to get things done, to be able to get his budget cleared, to be able to get the facilities he needs, the upgrades he needs, different things like that. It can become a big issue. When I kind of wanted to sum everything up, I said, do you have any other additional comments you would like to make? And Burl made a point to tell me it's one of the most rewarding experiences he's ever had. As I'm looking into athletic administration, athletic management, different things like that, he really wanted to push me towards possible career in high school athletic directing. Though it may not be the most glamorous of jobs, though it may not be the highest paying job, he said it's a very rewarding experience and something that he's loved. It's opened up new doors for him, and now he's actually looking at more of the academic administration side. So he's looking at a higher position within Fort Bush High School. Being a family friend of mine, I kind of do hope that works out for him, and that if he pursues a principal position, if he pursues anything higher than where he's at now, that he receives that. But he said it's rewarding. It's something that opens up new doors for you, creates new paths, and really leads you where you want to go in the athletic world. So, summing up the whole interview from my standpoint, I think the biggest thing that I learned is that high school athletic directing is a lot more complicated than it may seem. I played high school sports. I played 4 high school sports, and I kind of always got on to either I blame my athletic director for a game because we lost it and we should have been playing an easier team, or I thought that she should have been a little better at helping us out getting gear or anything like that. And I didn't really realize all the stuff that an athletic director has to do, from scheduling to budgeting to payroll to compliance to officiating reports to different things like that. Like, I think in the end, I just really learned a lot about what it takes to be an athletic director. I am possibly considering this as a career. I coach at a local high school now and have been looking into opportunities to both teach and continue my coaching, but also looking into different athletic directing opportunities throughout Wake County as well as Forsyth and Yadkin County, where I'm from. So I think it's a big thing for me to be able to talk to an athletic director, to be able to talk to one as a friend, especially somebody that I hold dear, who can really be honest with me about what it takes and can really shed some light into the life of an athletic director. What it comes down to for me is, do I want to put in those 60 hours? Do I want to be that hardworking and motivated to push my teams to the next level? And I believe that I do. So it's definitely a career possibility for me. And through this interview, I've learned that, and this has been a very educational experience for me, and this interview was very helpful. And I think going forward, I will be able to look back on it and really use some of the stuff that Mr. Love said to help me in my career choices as well as my professional career. All right, thank you for listening. I know it was long, but I really enjoyed this assignment, and I think it was very beneficial. So thank you, and good night.